Circles are better than rows. That's the title that we have for today. I don't know who first said it or where it originated from. I've heard various people say it. I've even read it. I can't tell you what it means, though. Circles is referring to Christian community, being involved in Christian community, participating in that. Rows is referring to what many of you are sitting in right now. And it's simply, the point of it is simply this. If all you're doing once a week is coming to a service like this and sitting in a row for 1 hour, there is a better way. There is more for you, and it is a circle, being involved in Christian community. And that's what we're gonna be looking at today. In fact, specifically, we're gonna be looking at how Christian community really helps us during hard times in life. That's the key idea. You can look up at the screen or it's in your notes as well. It's simply this, that life in groups, which is the way that the phrase I'm gonna use today for Christian community. Life in groups helps us hang on when life gets hard. We're gonna be in Hebrews, so if you have a Bible or an app or something, go ahead and open up to Hebrews chapter 10, and we'll get there in just a second. While you're turning there, let me just real quickly say in Hebrews is written to Christians. They were Jews, now they're believing in and following Jesus as their Messiah, and life has gotten hard for them. Life has gotten difficult for them because they decided to live life in groups with other believers. They are suffering and being persecuted, and it's gotten hard. In fact, it says this in Hebrews 12. It says, therefore, strengthen your tired hands and your weakened knees. What is really referring to in that verse is he's saying, I know that spiritually you're exhausted, spiritually you're hurting. Spiritually, life has gotten hard, and because of your suffering and you're being persecuted, and hang in there. Don't give up. Don't give up. They're having a bit of what we often call like a faith crisis. Have any of you ever been there? Have any of you ever been at a place where life has gotten so hard, particularly spiritually speaking, that it's caused your faith to go into a bit of a spin cycle? You know what I mean? And you're having what we sometimes refer to as a faith crisis. I remember in my own life some years ago, we started a church and we did that for a while. And then it came to a point where we said, we need to end this and close it down. I was like, God, I don't understand this. Everything seemed right about this, and that this is what you were doing and what you wanted. And now you're telling us to shut this down. And it causes you to question some things that you thought were really clear and simple and easy before, and now you're not so sure. There was a time some years back where we did foster care, and we had these 2 little girls for a couple years, and right when it came to the point of adopting them, and we were excited about that, they were then taken out of our home, put back in the system, and just bounced around from foster home to foster home to foster home. Some of them were rough places for them, and it's like, God, what is going on here? And it caused, the things that, again, that we thought to be real, and thought to be true, is just, we were confused. Maybe for you, the person that you married didn't end up being the person that you thought they were or they said they were. And it's caused your faith to go into a bit of a spin cycle. Maybe you had a boss at work who was always there for you, had your back and took your side until something really, really big came down the pipe. And then that boss just totally threw you under the bus in order to protect themselves. And you're like, what is this? What's going on here? And it's like when that happens, it's like this punch to the spiritual gut, right? And it just, it hurts, and it causes you to question things about God and what he's doing. Maybe you have some friends or family members that when they find out that you're deciding to follow Jesus, and here's what that looks like for you, and here's what that means for you, they start to withdraw, they start to pull back, they start to distance themselves. And it's gotten to a point now where it's just hard. It's hard. It's all hard. I mean, there's lots of things in our lives like this that happen. And maybe for some of you, it was even just a matter of you have these plans that you want to do, that you have. And here's the thing, though. You would say that they're even godly plans. They're not selfish plans. They're not about how to make me rich and make me better. Like, these are good, godly plans. And then the floor just kind of fell out from underneath it. And you're like, God, what I thought I knew and believed about you, I'm not so sure anymore because of what I'm experiencing in real life. It's like it doesn't totally seem to match up or line up. Maybe there's just something you prayed for over and over for years, and it's like you're just like, God, I don't even know if I should pray for this anymore. I don't even know if you're hearing me. I don't even know. It seems like you're so far away. I'm certainly not seeing any answer here, and you're just ready to give up on that completely. And this is what happens when life gets hard in this way. We have these phrases that we sometimes use. We say things like, we're losing heart. We're losing heart. We're about to give up. When life spiritually gets hard like this, we begin to lose confidence. Confidence in who we thought God was and what we thought God was all about and who we thought we even were in him. We lose confidence. We lose hope. We get discouraged. We start compromising. We start settling. We feel weak. Our hands are tired and our knees are weak. And man, at that moment, at those times in life, we need groups. We need people around us to help us hang on. And I want us to see why that is and what that looks like. So we're really just looking at two verses today. It's Hebrews 10, verse 24 and 25. We're just going to focus on those two verses. Here's what they say, verse 24. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So he begins by saying, let us consider how we may do this. Let us consider. Another way that we can say that is, let us look for and think about how can we intentionally be looking out for one another. Or here's how I'm saying it today, that life in groups is where we watch out for one another. That's the idea of considering. Hey, let us come together and let's consider, let's be intentional. Let's look for, how can I watch out for you and how can you watch out for me? Because this is what happens when we do life in groups. And this is what we need. We need people watching out for us. Let's think conversely for a minute, okay? What happens when we are in isolation or aloneness? So a few examples come to my mind. I just want to share a couple quick examples with you. One is David, King David. Many of you have heard of him. You know who he is. He's the guy that when he was a boy, he throws the big rock, knocks down Goliath, knocks him out cold and kills him. He's the guy who's the king of Israel, did a whole bunch of great things for Israel. He's the guy that's wrote most of the Psalms. He's the guy that says he has a heart after God's own heart. He's the guy that saw this woman Bathsheba and committed adultery with her and impregnated her and then tried to cover it up with some deceit. And when none of that worked, he committed murder. Now, here's my question. When did those things happen for him? Guess what? This will come as a big surprise to you. They didn't happen when someone was watching out for him. They happened when he was all alone. 2 Samuel 11, when we read about those events, the very first verse says this: at the time of the year when kings go off to war, David stayed behind. David was all alone. He was in isolation. And then you read on, you read all those events that happened in the way he fell into sin. Yeah, here's another one, Elijah. Elijah was this incredible prophet of God. God used Elijah in powerful, powerful ways. I mean, truly, we don't have time to get into specifics and examples and all that of what, but truly, Elijah saw God do supernatural miracles right through him. I mean, he saw it firsthand with his own two eyes. And then there's this wacky, crazy girl named Jezebel. And she decides she doesn't like Elijah. In fact, she wants him dead. So she sends, she was a king's wife. And so she has the ability to send a whole bunch of people after Elijah to kill him. And Elijah goes off running. Keep in mind, this is the guy who's done incredible things, seen God work firsthand in incredible ways. And he goes off running, and he gets to a point in his life, Elijah does, where he says, God, just take my life. I want to die. Now, here's my question again. When did Elijah come to a place where he was so depressed that he became suicidal? When did that happen? Didn't happen when somebody was watching out for him. It happened when he was on the run from Jezebel and he was in a cave hiding all by himself. He was all alone. Think of Jesus with me. Last example, Jesus. So we don't know much about Jesus' childhood, right? The Bible doesn't tell us too much about him as a kid, but we know a lot about his ministry. And right before Jesus starts his ministry, where he's gonna go out and he's gonna gather 12 disciples, which by the way are his group. He does life in a group himself. And right before he grabs these guys and starts doing ministry, before that happens, Satan comes to Jesus. Satan approaches head to head to attack Jesus and to tempt him, trying to cause him to fall and turn away from what the Father has for him, right? And when does that happen? When does Satan approach Jesus and attack him? It doesn't happen when Jesus is in a group with his 12 guys. It doesn't happen when Jesus is sitting at the dinner table with mom and dad. You know what happens? Happens right before Jesus begins his ministry, and he goes out into the wilderness by himself for 40 days to pray and fast and prepare for the ministry that God has before him. And when Jesus is all alone, Satan sees that this is my time to show up and attack. Peter says that Satan is like a lion that goes around seeking someone to devour. Now, lions, you may know, they're the king of the jungle, right? And if you take a herd of lions and a herd of elephants and match them up and put them in a fight, the elephants are actually gonna win, right? They're gonna take their little baby small elephants that are more vulnerable, they're gonna put them in the middle of the pack. The elephants are gonna circle around kind of with their like butts in so that they're facing out. They're gonna use their huge tusks and their big trunk, and they're gonna fight off that herd of lions, and most likely those elephants will win. But if one elephant, even if it's a full-grown adult elephant, if it breaks free from the herd and is all alone, all by itself, and is even just a small pack of lions find that elephant all alone, guess who wins? The lions win, and the elephant dies. I mean, this is why it's so important that we watch out for one another. Here's what isolation does, and I've said it, I'm just summing it up for you. Isolation is a time, it's like an invitation to Satan, like what we see happen in Jesus' life. Isolation is a time where we become self-obsessed, depressed, suicidal, focused on how bad our life is. Isolation is a time where we can fall into sin, like David. On the flip side of that, we're saying life in groups is where we watch out for one another. I remember when I first started running, I did one of my first half marathons. And I show up to this marathon, I notice in the front of the line, or before it all started, there were quite a few people that had a little stick in their hand. And at the top of the stick were some numbers written on a piece of paper. Some of them said like 1:30 or 1:40 and so on and so forth, or 150 or whatever. And so I asked someone, what are those people, what do those signs mean? What are they doing? I don't understand. They said, oh, those people, they're pacers. What's written on that stick, that's a time. It's 1 hour and 30 minutes, or 1 hour and 40 minutes, or whatever it says. And it's a time. See, those people, those pacers, they're not here to race the race. They're simply here to watch out for you. What they're saying is, if you run with me if you join my group of people, I will make sure that you finish in whatever time it says on the piece of paper. They're simply there to watch out for you. And here's another thing I've learned about as I've been running over years is that anytime you run alone, I always go slower and it always hurts a little bit more. Go figure, I know. It doesn't always hurt. Some of you are like, it always hurts, doesn't it? No, not always. But if I'm running with someone, even if it's just one other person, I find that I'll go faster, even if it's just by a little bit. My pace will pick up, I'll go faster, and it will actually be a little bit easier. Life in groups is where we watch out for one another. It's one reason why it's so, so important. But look what he says next. Look back at verse 24. He says something else that's just as important. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. This idea of spur one another on, there's some other ways to say that. We could say like provoke one another or challenge one another. Here's what I want to say today. Life in groups stirs us up when we start to settle. In other words, he's saying, hey, let us consider, watch out for each other, how you can stir each other up toward love and good deeds. Let me see if this helps. Okay. Makes me nervous picking that thing. This is the third time I've done this. Makes me nervous every time. All right, so here's the thing. We all have love and good works in us, as you know, especially as followers of Jesus. We have his love in us and the strength he gives us to live, to serve others the way that he's called us to. But when life gets hard, it just has a way of settling to the bottom. And literally what he's saying is, hey, do life in groups, because this is where other people, another person in that group reaches into your life and starts to stir you up, stir up those love and good works that are in you, so that they begin to shine in you instead of, losing heart and confidence and hope, and you're stirred up again. Your faith is strengthened. You're encouraged to live the way that God has called you to live. Because when life gets hard, the love and the good works, they just start to settle to the bottom. We start to compromise a little bit. We feel spiritually weak. And here's what we often do is we tend at those times when life is so hard, that we tend to focus inwardly, don't we? We just get so wrapped up on ourselves. We start looking at our own pain and our own problems. And then ironically, we think, you know what? I've got to get rid of some of this pain, and I've got to fix some of my problems before I can step back into a group with other people, a Christian community. And nothing could be further from the truth. And our American society culture just totally encourages that, like be independent and be strong and stand on your own 2 feet, and you should be able to take care of yourself and pull up and all that. And so it just encourages us to say, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll kind of get myself, back where I should be, and then I'll step back into a group. And the exact opposite is the case. He's saying, no, it's life in a group. This is where, when it's all settled, when you've lost all hope, when you're losing heart, when you don't feel like you could go on anymore, you can't do it on your own. This is where another person reaches in and stirs you up, and you reach in and you stir up another person. This is what I love about Jesus, the example of Jesus. It's so powerful. Think about this with me. Jesus is suffering. Jesus is being persecuted. Jesus' life is about as hard as life can get. Jesus, we could even say, is having a faith crisis. But all the way to his last breath on a cross, how does Jesus live? Always for the benefit of others. Never self-absorbed and self-focused and detaching himself from the community, and I'll just kind of fix myself and then I'll go. No, he's always living always pouring out love and good works for the benefit of others. That's what this Christian community, what this life and group is about. It's not about how do you benefit me. Get this. It's how do I step into this group and how do I reach in your life and benefit you, just like Jesus did all the time. It's such an important thing for us to grab hold of today. And when life gets hard and we're tested, we're gonna need someone to reach in and stir us up. You know, in the Bible, there's over 50 times where it says one another, do something for one another, like love one another, or encourage one another, or pray for one another, or whatever it may be. Over 50 times it says that. Here's the thing. You can't one another if you don't have another to one another with, right? I mean, think about it. You can't one another if you don't have another to one another with. It's not possible. In other words, like, you can't stir yourself up. That's what we have to come to understand and believe and accept. That we need this group, this community to help us do this. So why wouldn't everyone just do this? I mean, in some ways it seems like, well, it seems so easy. It kind of seems so like, hopefully it really makes sense. And why wouldn't we all just be doing life in a group then like this? Like, why do we even sort of like need to talk about this in a sense? Because the reality is many of us, we don't do life in a group. In fact, that was the case here. Look back at verse 25 again. Verse 25, it says, not giving up meeting together. So in other words, he says, hey, don't stop meeting together as some of you are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another. Don't stop meeting together as some of you are in the habit of. Why did some of them stop meeting together? Why? Probably for the same reasons why a lot of us stop meeting together. Because it had gotten really hard and really costly. I mean, look at a few verses later in Hebrews 10, thank you. It says, remember those, look at how they're struggling and how they're hurting. It says, remember those earlier days after you had received the light when you endured in great conflict, full of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You suffered along with those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourselves had a better and lasting possessions. See, life in groups is costly. Here's what's happening. What's happening is, picture this. There's, in Hebrews, these Jewish people that he's written to, they had decided to follow Jesus. They stepped into Christian community. They were doing life in groups. And people outside of that, friends and family members and religious leaders and whoever, they're looking at them saying, I don't understand this. I don't like this. And they start persecuting them. They start suffering. They're like, you know what? I don't think I really agree. I'm going to go break into your home, confiscate your stuff, just take it, right? And so then what you have is people in this group, these Jewish Christians, they're saying, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Like, this is like, it's too hard, it's too costly to be involved in Christian community and follow Jesus. We're suffering, we're being persecuted, we're having our stuff taken. And here's what I know. If I leave this group, if I give up the habit of meeting together, if I just kind of step out of this and go back to Judaism, guess what? And life gets a lot easier. Life gets a lot easier. You know, there's legal protection in Judaism at the time, all kinds of things. Life goes from being hard to going to be easier. And maybe some of you are even in that place now, right? It's so hard to be in this group and to follow Jesus, and maybe you're suffering or going through different hardships, and you're looking and you're thinking, if I go back to something, it just gets easier. Life in groups is costly, but it's rewarding. Here's a couple of the things that it costs. Think with me here. Life in groups, it will cost us our reputation. Maybe just like I just described, there are friends that you have, there are family members that you have, and they look at how you're living in a group and they pull away a little bit. Maybe there's some people at work that are like, hey, after work today, let's go out, go this place and do this thing. And you're thinking, that's not gonna go so well for me. I don't really wanna do that. It's not gonna be good, it's not gonna be, and then you're thinking, do I tell them that I have life group tonight? That's gonna be weird, they're not even gonna know what that means. Do I tell them that I have a Bible study tonight? They might know what that means, but it could possibly get weirder. And you start thinking through, because here's what you do know. What you do know is, depending on what I say and how I respond to these people, my reputation is at stake. It will cost me a little bit of my reputation. These people, whoever they are, they'll look at me a little bit differently. They'll think about me a little bit differently. They'll probably talk to me a little bit differently. They'll exclude me from some things a little bit more. Do I want to pay that cost? Am I willing to pay that price? But here's the thing, if we are, we can also have a far greater influence on them because they know you are a man and a woman of faith and of character. Here's another thing that costs us our time. Life in groups cost time, which is such an interesting thing to me because time, for all the advancements we've made with time, right? All the ways that we save time, technology and stuff, and it's true, we do, but none of it really matters, right? None of it matters. Why? Because any time that we save, we then just find ways to fill it up with more crap. Like it doesn't matter. We're right back, all right where we started. At some point we just have to say, you know what, there's 24 hours in a day, there's 7 days. We all have the same amount of time. Am I willing to pay the cost of time that it will require me to do life in groups? Because when I'm doing it, guess what? I'm spending time though in relationships with people, and I know how important that is. I'm investing in another person. They're investing in me, and I know how important that is. When I spend time in this way, someone's taking the time to pray for me specifically, and I'm praying for them. And this is time well spent, well rewarding, though costly. It also costs us comfortableness. Our comfortableness. There are people that are like you, and then you're very comfortable around them. But when we do life in groups, what we also find is that there are people that are not like you. They think a little bit differently than you. They have some different views and opinions, maybe even beliefs. They're not like you. And that can be challenging at times, and it causes you to feel uncomfortable, right? But here's the point. The goal isn't that you do life in a group and you change everything about yourself to become like that other person. Maybe there's some things you need to change, but that's not the goal. The point is, though, that as we listen to each other, as we learn from each other, it's gonna be uncomfortable, but I'm gonna come to understand why you have those beliefs or thoughts or opinions. I'm gonna understand a little bit more where they're coming from. I'm gonna understand and be able to sympathize and empathize with other people that maybe are like you, that have experienced similar things. And I'm gonna be able to walk alongside better people just like you in ways that I couldn't before. And this is a good thing. It's costly, but there is a reward that comes with it. Energy. To know that when I show up to a group at the end of the day, often they meet at the end of the day, it would be so much easier to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. That requires low energy. I have to tap the screen a couple times on my iPad, but other than that, once I get past the tapping, then I'm pretty good to go. But if I show up to life group or a Bible study, what do I know? I know I'm gonna have to show up and reach into someone's life and stir them up, help stir them up. This requires energy for me right now, just to do this in a dumb water thing, just like the illustration. That required energy. But like in real life, to do that in another person's life requires energy. It requires energy for me to say, to show up and to watch out for another person, to care for another person. And maybe at the end of the life group, maybe at the end of the Bible study or whatever it is that you're in, maybe at the end of that time, you actually feel more physically drained and tired because it did require energy. It did. But your faith is strengthened and it's stronger than it was before you went into it. Here's the last one, vulnerability. Vulnerability. There's this is the me that I want you to see and know. And then there's this is the more true picture of me that I'm not sure I want you to see, most people don't see, and probably only a couple people really, really see and know about. And so now I step into life in groups, and this doesn't work, if we're all kind of hiding behind masks. I mean, the only way it sort of works, of course, is as some vulnerability begins to happen, as we start to drop some masks, as we start to expose ourselves, and as I start to share, here's some things that I struggle with, here's some fears that I have. We start to open up and say those things to each other. We start to see the inside of where people actually live and hear the backdrop to their story. We start to expose ourselves a little bit, and it's vulnerability, and that is costly. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. But if we are willing to do that, if we are willing to be vulnerable, you know what else happens? We move out from places of fear. We move out from places of shame that we were covering up and hiding from and in, and we move away from that. And we find the strength together with others in this group to persevere, to not lose heart, to gain confidence back, to have our love and good works stirred back up again. So here's what I want to challenge you to do. In your bulletin, you can take this out. There's a little card that says life groups. And this isn't the only way to do life in groups. It's a way to do it. But if you're not living life in groups, then I want to encourage you to do this. We have new life groups that are starting after fall break and a few weeks later in October. They're just going for 6 weeks, and so it's a beginning. It's a starting point for you to experience what I've been talking about today. And if you're not doing life in groups with other people, I just want to encourage you to fill this card out and just drop it in an offering box at any one of the doors on your way out, and we'll follow up with you and help you find life in groups.